Rights, and Hilary Shelton is on the line with us. Hilary is the NAACP Washington Bureau Director and Senior Vice President for Advocacy for the NAACP, NAACP.org, of course, the website. Hilary, it's great to have you with us.
Hey, Tom, it's great to be with you.
So today is the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Civil Rights Act. We played in our first hour much of the speech that Lyndon Johnson gave on this day, but we haven't talked so much about, what brought it about and what has happened since then, because I wanted to get your take on that. Where are we at, and how consequential was the Civil Rights Act of 1964?
Well, let me say we've come a long way since 1964. The 64 Act was a bill that actually helped create some construct around the enforcement of the promises of the Constitution in the area of equal protection under law and equal opportunity for all Americans. A lot went into Johnson signing that bill. If we take a few steps back in our history, we know that there was a continuous momentum in this country in a struggle for civil rights going back to, in many ways, you can pinpoint in the 40s. As African Americans were coming back from World War II, but not being able to enjoy all the privileges of citizenship in our country, all the rights and protections. We know that Congress passed some bills to be able to provide some additional protection, but we knew it wasn't enough. We knew that as we moved into the 1950s, we had a number of demonstrations, protests, boycotts, and sit-ins across the country because, again, as African Americans and others were beginning to migrate to the North, they were saying that it wasn't just a Southern phenomenon. Many of the same problems they had in the South, they were occurring also in the North, and they found themselves relegated into ghettos and other depressed areas throughout those cities. So a lot was happening as we made that move across the country. Moving up to 1963, we had over 209 cities having all kind of demonstrations going on. As a matter of fact, over 1,000 demonstrations were going on in those cities as we moved to 1963. If we think about then a hard stop to begin seeing that forward march to the movement to pass the Civil Rights Act in 1964, certainly the March on Washington, which we also commemorated last year's 50th anniversary, played a major role. When you had hundreds of thousands of Americans of all races and genders and ethnicities and religious backgrounds all coming to the nation's capital, in the words of Dr. King, to address that promissory note of the Constitution, that check, did it come back stamped insufficient funds, and the infrastructure was not put in place to help guarantee that right that the Constitution so clearly espoused. So we moved to that point then to, 1963, moving to 1964, major events like Bloody Sunday, the Birmingham church bombing. We saw civil rights workers like Medgar Evers and William Moore murdered in the United States. We saw many things happening across our country, and it became very clear, first, articulated by President Kennedy, that something needed to be done, and he called for a bill, as a matter of fact, to move forward to address those concerns. And, of course, after his assassination in 1963, Lyndon Johnson picked up the mantle and moved us through to its signing on this good day, July 2nd of 1964.
Yeah. And I had a caller earlier who suggested that because President Obama is our first African-American president, there has been this explosion of racist and right-wing activity in opposition to him. It's like the closet racists have come out of the closet, and the Republican Party is speaking in dog whistle, and you've got John Boehner now saying he's going to sue the president for basically being uppity, for going beyond for being illegitimate in his actions. This is after, for 4 years, they questioned whether he was even legitimately the president. And finally, he produced his birth certificate. And now they're questioning whether he can legitimately act. And this caller was wondering if we would see sexism similarly if Hillary was president. I was saying, of course. But the Southern Poverty Law Center says that in some ways it's getting worse in the United States, although the big exception is people under 30. What's your take on where we're at with regard to the relations between the races in the United States?
Well, listen, the Southern Poverty Law Center is correct. As we look at the numbers, we've seen a strong increase of extremist groups, hate groups, even groups like the Klan are out recruiting, again, the Posse Comitatus, the Aryan Nation, the Nazi Party, and some of the militia groups are growing as well. So we're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of reaction happening. But, Tom, this is not extraordinary. Within our society, and certainly the economic downturn played a major role in how things are playing out now. Whenever we run into an economic downturn, right-wing extremist racist groups utilize that as an opportunity to actually promote their racist agenda.
Right.
Hardworking Americans are trying to figure out what happened. They're working hard. They're trying to take care of their families. They're playing by the rules. But they still find themselves out of work a lot longer. They find themselves being paid less money for doing jobs they were given a living wage for doing years ago. So a lot has changed. People are looking for answers, and sadly and unfortunately, the head of the Klan, the head of the hate group, the militia group shows up at the front door and says, here's your problem. Everything we told you about what would happen if we had African Americans in leadership are coming to pass. Though they won't point for a minute that the problems that this president ended up having to solve were not problems created while he was in power. They are problems created while yet another president was in power, yet the same kinds of challenges, the same kinds of a scrutiny was not applied to that president. So we still have a lot of problems and things still to do. We've been looking at even some of the hate crimes figures, and we're seeing an increase in hate crimes in our country, and still disproportionately. Yeah. Even though African Americans make up only 12.4% of the population, according to the 2010 census, we make up almost 70% of the victims of hate crimes in the country.
Wow.
So we do have that problem, and I do think, going back and looking at even the president being actually winning the Democratic nomination in Denver, Colorado, and that group of extremists that came down from the mountains in their Jeep filled with ammunition and firearms with the express plan of assassinating that president as he would speak at the Mile High Stadium are issues that speak still loudly and clearly to those problems.
Yeah, this is something that the press doesn't like to emphasize. I think because the White House doesn't want to emphasize it, but nobody is denying it, that there have been more serious, legitimate, by legitimate I mean, capable of actually doing it, pulling it off. There have been more serious conspiracies to assassinate President Obama than there have been any other president in history. And we've had some fairly unpopular presidents, particularly Jack Kennedy, in terms of, riling up the hard right. But this is like an order of magnitude larger. I think by the end of his first or second year, I remember hearing that there had been 8 serious conspiracies that had they not been caught or infiltrated, might have been successful in assassinating this president. And the number has, grown significantly since then.
Well, Tom, you're absolutely right. And listen, if you look at those 6, too, the reason they were able to find out about those is because there was more than one person involved in the plot or plan. But you and I both know some of the biggest challenges in our country are those that don't necessarily become members of these groups,
right?
Ascribe to their philosophies, but then act as that lone wolf.
Yeah.
And carry out some of the most...
Yeah, the kid who shot Reagan, for example.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. So we still have all those problems still going on. But, I think something this is very empowering and enlightening in the data you shared as well is those under 30. We have a new generation that's coming in, and they're not buying just anything that's being pushed in their direction. They're communicating differently using social media. They're thinking about what's going on. They're buying more into this integrated vision of an all-inclusive America. And I have to say, being the father of 3 sons between 10 and 19, it's great to see that that's where this generation is going. They're heading in the right direction. I guess there's a lot of these old heads we're still going to have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems that the calls I get, the hate mail I get, certainly seems to be from my generation. From people who are, let's say, over 40, maybe over 50,
sure,
and particularly over 60, and not so much the younger people. And that's actually really, really good news for America.
I think so too.
So in the minute we have left, we're talking with Hilary Shelton, the NAACP Washington Bureau Director. what's the NAACP doing to celebrate this today?
Well, certainly we have 2,200 membership units throughout the country. They're involved in celebrations all throughout. We participated in a number of press conferences. We actually dedicated our testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee to fix the Voting Rights Act. To the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as well. As you know, there are provisions in the Civil Rights Act that speak to the right to vote and provide those additional protections as well.
Right.
So it's important that we're doing what we're doing now, having the kind of conversations with you, Tom.
Well, particularly while we've got, the Voting Rights Act under assault from the Supreme Court. You've got governors like Scott Walker, trying to dial back the ability of, and what's his name in North Carolina, trying to dial back the ability of people of color to vote, and young people and old people of all races. It's really important, the work that you're doing, Hilary, and I salute you for it. Hilary Shelton, he's the NAACP Washington Bureau Director and Senior Vice President for Advocacy, and a great guy. Twitter, Hilary O. Shelton, Shelton. Hilary, thanks so much for being with us.
Tom, it's always great to be with.
We'll be back.